I have a few announcements just before we get started. I would like to remind everyone that you'll be able to sign up for Magpie CTFS starting as a student next week. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be posting about it in our club server. All right. So last workshop of the year, basics of breaking into a box. Here's our attendance form. You got a QR code you can use, take a picture with your phone, or we should be posting a link in chat right away. Just give people a couple minutes to fill that out. And just a reminder, you do need to have at least 50% attendance for voting rights as a club member. So fill this out. All right. Perfect. I hope everyone was able to get that done. So if you didn't see the post in the Discord before, we need a few tools for this workshop. So if you're on Kali, which I would recommend using, is what we started with at the beginning of the year, you can run sudo apt update, get all the new packages. We're going to need Nmap. So if you run that command there, it'll install Nmap for you, and Kali will come with it. So in that case, it'll just update it. I'm going to be using Chromium today as our web browser. You can use any other web browser you want, but this is what I'm going to be using. So when it comes to inspecting things, everything's a little bit different with each one. But so if you want to follow along exactly as I am, I'd recommend you use Chromium. The last thing we're going to need is some kind of shell. So Kali is going to have a bash shell by default, and SSH should be already installed. Most Linux distributions will have this as well, so don't worry about that. All right, a quick word about what we're doing today in this workshop. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense right away. There's a lot of things we're going to be covering, and it's understandable if we're doing a lot and it doesn't make sense right away. It didn't to me when I first started. This workshop's not going to make you into an elite hacker. That's not the goal here. It's to whet your appetite for this kind of content and for this type of penetration testing knowledge into information security. It's nothing more than that. It's a simple exercise. So it's a summative exercise as well that builds on every workshop you've done so far this semester. So you're going to be using techniques and tools from everything we've looked at. It's going to focus heavier on the Linux terminal basics, as well as the web exploitation workshop you guys did. But key concepts from every workshop you've done this far are going to be applied. And there is an advanced box breaking workshop as well that was done earlier this year. All of our workshops are, well, most of them, I should say, are recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. So if you want to look at any prior recordings, you can go there. As I said before, it covers a lot of things you haven't seen before. We're going to be doing things today that you haven't seen in other workshops. Lots of skills. We grouped them all together and we can use them as one cohesive unit to break boxes. Ask lots of questions. Just put them in the chat. That's fine. You don't need to know everything. Just ask. We're here to learn. This is purely educational. All right. An outline for today, what we're going to be doing. Well, we're going to first cover what this workshop is and what it is not. A word of warning about what you're about to see. The 4 E's, so the 4 steps of breaking boxes: evaluation, enumeration, exploitation, and escalation. A recap of what we did, and some final thoughts on the entire process. So this exercise is some strategies, methods, and tools. This is a limited selection of what you could be using for box breaking. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But it's by no means a comprehensive list by any stretch of the imagination. There is a lot more beyond this. So we're going to look out for a few things, and we're going to try and avoid a few things. This is generalized information. What you see here today is not going to apply to probably any other box you see. This is applying to this box as it is. And there's going to be some semantic things the way I would approach these problems. So you may approach things differently. This way I'm going to approach them. What it is not is a red team exercise. So for those that don't know, in penetration testing in the cybersecurity world, when you are paid to try and infiltrate a company's systems and you're on the offensive, that is a red team exercise. The opposite is a blue team. You're trying to defend against the red team. That's not what this is. We're not doing that today. We're not social engineering, so we're not calling people and trying to get them to tell us their credentials. A one-size-fits-all solution. It's definitely not that. As I've covered before, this is by no means comprehensive. You can apply the overall philosophy of this workshop, the 4 E's primarily, but a lot of the tools we're using and the way we're going to be finding exploits are going to apply to this box only. And it's not a license for vagrant villainy. You don't need to go out and attack innocent people with this information. Don't do it. It's against our club rules. In all seriousness, if you go against the club's code of conduct, your membership will be revoked, and it's possible in some cases that legal action could be taken against you, not from us. Again, don't go touching systems because you feel like you're an elite hacker. Just don't do it. All right. So, does anyone have any questions so far? Feel free to post them in the chat. Just going to take a quick water break. All right. So, this is the IP address of the box we're going to be using today. So we could probably start by posting that there. You don't need to go into it yet. Just have it on hand. So we can put that in the chat now. So today's exercise is going to be to demonstrate the principles of box breaking. This box was built by another club member of ours, VP Tech Josh Novak. He's the one who ran this workshop last year. We adapted it for the beginner workshop. So it has a lot of flaws and they're very intentional. You're not going to find boxes like this in the wild typically that are this easy to abuse. But with that said, it's for learning. Don't sabotage the box. We want people to actually be able to use this box. Don't sabotage the box, please. So we don't want you editing or removing files. Don't add large amounts of files. Don't change passwords, please. And don't DOS the box. This is a denial of service is what this stands for. So we don't want you spamming, overwhelming the box's ability to take incoming or connection requests, essentially. You don't want to jam up the box. And if I am going too slow, you are more than welcome to go ahead in the workshop. I'm going to talk about the objectives here in just a second, after I cover a few bits of terminology. What's a box and why are we breaking it? So a box in this context of the workshop and other things that you may have heard of, like Try Hack Me and Hack the Box, is a target machine or a computer of some kind. It's some kind of system, might be remote, might be local or in front of you, that you're trying to get access to. But at its core, it's a system you're trying to break into. So gain entry to when you don't have entry initially. And you could be trying to do a variety of things. Typically, you're trying to get root. And I'll explain what that is in a second here. But what we have today is what you would refer to as a black box. So it's a method of penetration testing in which the hacker is given no prior information to a target network or computer system to hack. All I've given to you today is the IP address. That's the internet location of this box. That's all you know this far. What is root? So I'm just going over a few things. So in case you know these things already, feel free to just hang out for a sec, but in case not everyone knows, I want to go over this stuff. The root is the user name of an account by default that has access to all commands and files on a Linux or other Unix-like operating system. So other people call this the root account, root user, super user, or just root. You have total control over the system. If you are able to be root, you can do whatever you want. You can delete the entire file system. It will just let you do it. And you control all the other users on the system, all the information on the system you have access to. You own the system. So when people talk about being root, this is what they mean. So, and if in case you've seen this command before, the super user do command, sudo or sudo, can be used to run things as root without actually being root itself. So that is important to know. All this stuff I just talked about, if you're at U of C, is covered in Computer Science 329. That's the intro course to information and security principles, I believe. So take that if you're interested in this, or if you're currently taking it, you're going to have, you'll be fresh for this box. All right. We got the 4 E's here. So we're going to start with evaluation. Then we're going to go on to enumeration, escalation, and exploitation. So these arrows aren't always pointing to the next thing. They can go backwards. We'll talk about that in a second, but this is the general order that you're going to follow things in. Perfect. Let's start with evaluation. This is what you're going to be doing before you actually do anything. So in the context of this box, there isn't much to evaluate, unfortunately. I've given you IP. I've told you it's a box. That's as far as evaluation needs to go. But you don't need to do it. It can be helpful. So you're going to look at the context of the box. Is it in a capture the flag event? Is it in a hacking service? Hack the box, try hack me. There's clues and hints typically in the name of the box and what you're trying to find and what you're trying to access, maybe the way you're trying to gain access. But today I've told you the IP and that's it. There's not much else to go on. OSINT is open source intelligence. How much can you find without really knowing much about it, essentially is what it means. How much are you able to find with having no privileges and no access? Can you Google things about the box? Can you Google the name of the box? Is there information that's going to help you that way? And what should you know before you attack? What could make your life easier? This mostly refers to using tools like Kali and the like, and the knowledge I'm teaching you today to kind of have a developed approach at doing this. So today's goal at the core of it is to get the root flag on this machine. So we talked about root. They're the upmost directory in a Linux machine is the root directory. So it's at this file path right here. I would remember this. It's going to become important later, but you don't need to be root today. Don't try to be root either. It's not the goal here because we want this box to stay intact for everyone. So you have that IP in chat. If you remember what we did in the web exploitation workshop, maybe see what you can do with that IP. And I'll give you about a minute to play with that. See if a web browser would help you, like Chromium. Found a flag. Perfect. Make sure you're submitting flags to the Orchid bot and you're not posting them in the server. That's a reminder to everyone, not you specifically, Nick. I guess I should also mention that there are a total of 8 flags in this workshop. So if you want to keep track, that's how many there are. And it's going to be a bit different in the fact that we don't have static challenges. So they're not going to be one-on-one. You get one challenge, you get 3 flags, for example. They're going to be kind of everywhere. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a bit different, a little more dynamic. But again, feel free to ask questions if you have any in the chat. All right. Perfect. So I hope everyone put this IP into a web browser and saw that we get a website. So that's pretty interesting. More on that later. The next step is the enumeration step. So here you're going to be doing a bunch of system reconnaissance. Reconnaissance meaning you're going to be looking for things before you do them, essentially. You're going to be looking for evidence of things. You're going to be looking for how you can do things in the future. You're going to be looking for ways to work around the protections people have built up. So with this, you're going to be looking for services, versions, and operating systems. There's a few tools that we're going to have today that are going to help us with this. The one being Nmap. Oh, perfect. Another flag. We're going to be using Nmap today. You've seen Derb, Dirbuster, and GoBuster as well. You saw that in the, or you saw at least Derb in the web exploit workshop, and Enum for Linux, which allows you to, it's an enumeration tool. That's what Enum stands for. And it allows you to enumerate system information from remote systems, typically Linux and Windows machines. You're going to want to find weaknesses. So this refers to unpatched services, unprotected services, and common vulnerabilities and exploits. So these are bugs in software that are well known, hence they're common, and you can use those to your advantage if people haven't upgraded their systems. This is why Windows is so it irritates you to no end that it wants to update itself, because people are constantly trying to find exploits for Windows. We can try and brute force credentials. Typically nowadays, if people have set up their systems properly, this is difficult to do. It takes a lot of computing power to do, and it's not really a reasonable tactic unless you know that machine has not been set up properly and are using old hash algorithms, or they're using old encryption algorithms, in which case you can abuse it and crack it instantly. But if people are doing things properly, it's not really a thing. And the last thing, we talked about this in web exploit as well. Look at the website. Use the inspect tool. Is there anything in the HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, or in this case today, PHP, that we can look at? Like, is there anything that's going to give us some hints? We want to find things that we can exploit. But first, some more information, background information. So I want to talk about IP addresses quickly. If you've taken CPSC 441, you'll know everything I'm going to talk about here. That's the course on networks. I recommend everyone takes it. It's very important, but I will talk about it here anyways, in case you need to get up to speed. So a network has addresses in it, much like the houses on a street have addresses. So IP stands for Internet Protocol, and they are a type of address that you would use to find machines on a network. And this is how computers know where to send information to between a server and a computer, or a computer to computer. So within your, actually a good analogy for this is to think of an apartment building. It's going to have an address because there's more than one apartment building. They all each have their own addresses. So within the apartment building, there's separate apartments. So if we call those ports, in this case, in this analogy, each apartment is going to do a different thing, much like ports. So in this scenario, we have a few different ports that are going to be open on this website. Port 80 is the one that allows HTTP traffic to occur on our website. Port 22 allows secure shell. We'll talk about that in a second. Packets are just the actual information in a little bundle that is sent over the network to your IP address through a port on that IP. It's just information. That's all it is. It's just information over a network. Nmap is a scanning tool that is going to allow us to look at all of these things. You can plug an IP address into it and it will analyze the ports, what's running on those ports, what services, what versions are running on those ports. And it does this by sending packets to that IP address, and it enumerates through those ports. And I also want to talk about secure shell quickly. So if you've taken Computer Science 355 or 329, you would have seen this. I believe you still have to, those are introduced in those courses. So it stands for Secure Shell, SSH. And it's a cryptographic network protocol. What this means is you can use Secure Shell to do a variety of network tasks over an unsecured network. So typically you're going to be logging in remotely. So CLI command line interface and remote command execution. So you can run your code on a remote server from your computer using something called Secure Shell. There's a few clients for this, but a lot of people just use the terminal, or on Windows, PuTTY is super common. But with terminal and stuff, that's going to probably start changing. And SSH as a service normally runs on port 22. This is really important to remember. You'll pick it up right away, but just remember that. All right, so let's check and see if there's any questions so far. Doesn't look like it. Okay. So Nmap. What I want you to do is take this command for Nmap, and we're going to run it in your terminal. I'll first explain what a few of these modifiers do. A good way to also check what these do is to run the man page for Nmap. So you go man space Nmap, that we learned in the original Linux workshop. That's a really good way to remember these flags and these commands and what they do, but I'll explain them quickly here. So first we have Nmap, and we have tac sv, which is going to allow us to look at the versions of whatever is running on each of the ports that it finds, that it enumerates on. tac-sc is going to run a number of default scripts. So this command as a whole is what I would normally run when we're trying to enumerate on a given IP address. So that's why I've picked these. tac-pn is going to allow you to skip the host discovery stage. So if you know that your host is actually up and running, that the server isn't down, it gets around the fact that some servers can block scans using Nmap. So using that really helps that way. It's really common to have to use that. If they haven't set up their server like that, they're probably doing something wrong. And tac-t4 just refers to the timing of the Nmap scan. So it goes to a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least aggressive, 5 being the most aggressive. And it depends on the amount of system resources you want to put in. So 4 is a fairly aggressive scan, but we're going to keep that for now. Just copy that command. And at the end, you're going to insert that IP I have on the screen and is in the chat from earlier. So why doesn't everyone run that? We'll give you, let's say, 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and you'll run that command in your terminal. And I want some people to say in the chat what they get, what they see. This, it is important to note, I have another command here. This will take much, much longer, but I have it set up for a log as well. So this tac-on full scan, so this is a file name, we'll dump it out to a log file. And I have included the link for the Nmap manual, essentially. And port 2222 is off limits. You will find it. We need it for the box to run. Please don't touch it. And yeah, about 10 minutes. You ran the first one. Looks like you got 4 ports. Yeah, that's about right. What are those? What is the information on what information do we have on those ports? Perfect. So port 22, we talked about that, running the SSH service. Port 80, that's running our website. You saw that already. 2222 is required for the machine that we're running, and 3306 is another port. We'll figure that out later. I think it should be running MySQL, the MySQL service. You can run the full scan if you want. It depends on your system service. But if you have completed this and want to take a look, you can and you just want to go a bit ahead, I would read the man page for Nmap and just see what options you have in there. There's quite a few. It's quite interesting. It's a really useful tool. You'll use it almost every time you enumerate on a network. And it's not just for hacking, it's for system admins as well. Yeah, Nmap is really highly dependent on your Nmap is very dependent on your network speeds and your network conditions. So if you're at UFC right now, it's going to run very slowly because of the ways that they've set up data management there essentially. And something later in this workshop might not work because they're going to have blocked it because it's malicious. But we'll try and make it work anyways. But yeah, Nmap is very dependent on your network conditions and what kind of internet connection you have. And I should also take this time to mention that Nmap as a whole can be quite loud in terms of people you are trying to enumerate on. So if you do this to someone, they're probably going to hear, metaphorically hear, the fact that you're trying to do something to their system. You're scanning their system. It's quite a loud process. Not the most covert. Perfect. I think I will start moving on with this. I hope everyone got a chance to run at least one Nmap scan. If you want the status of it, just hit the up or down arrow keys while it's running and it'll tell you the percentage. But I will start running it here if I actually go to the proper slide. I'm just going to copy this command just to make it a little faster. All right, perfect. So we can see a few things here. I hope this is big enough for everyone. We have port 22. It's running on for TCP packets. There's two different kinds of packets. There's TCP and UDP. You'll learn about that in networks if you take that, but you don't need to worry about that for now. So it's open. That's the state of the port. Service SSH. We talked about that earlier. Running version open SSH 8.2 P1 Ubuntu. So this is on an Ubuntu server, a really common distribution of Linux. This version might be important to remember because remember we talked about versions. It's good to make note of those because old versions can be exploited sometimes. Depends how well the software is written. Port 80 open and HTTP. This is our web service. So this is what it's allowing us to look at the website right now. That's what you connect to when you're in the browser. You go to this IP and you connect through port 80. And we're running an Apache server here as well. You can see the version number. It's the Ubuntu version. This I talked about earlier. Don't attack it, please. But it's required for our virtual machine to run properly. And we have another port here, 3306. It's open, running a MySQL service. MySQL is a database service. So keep that in mind in case you don't know what that is yet. Or in case you've taken Computer Science 471, you do know what that is, and you probably don't like it very much. There is one thing I did forget to do, which is ping this. Because I remember we should make sure the host is up before we do this. So you can do that just by pinging the system. You go ping IP, and we can see we're sending packets. We're getting a response back, so we know the system is up. So we'll just cancel that. Right, perfect. On to the next step. Actually, that's not true. I forgot to go to the website and take a poke around. So if you post this into your web browser, you're going to find a few things. So it looks like we got a bank service here of some kind. Welcome to Badger Bank. Banking refined. Badger Bank is the global leader in blockchain-based personal and business banking. Interesting. Badger Bank Corporation. They look like they're pretty new. Learn more. Doesn't seem to work. Got a home page. Feature button doesn't seem to work. This website seems a little unfinished. Might be work in progress. So unfinished things typically have holes in them. And if you can find that hole or where they haven't finished their work, you might be able to exploit it. Let's take a look. Actually, while we're back here, we can actually inspect this page quick. So I'm doing this by right-clicking, going to inspect. I'm just going to zoom in a bit here. So we can take a look at the actual source code here. A really fast way to do this is to right-click on the top line, and you can go expand recursively. And then you can scroll through the source code this way. We'll just take a cursory scan through here. There isn't, I already know this, but there's not going to be anything too interesting in here. Nothing that catches my attention. No links. I mean, there's the PHP page over here. So if I click on that, it's going to bring us to it. But other than that, nothing super useful in there. Remember the things we looked at, web exploitation as well. Running Dirbuster, that kind of stuff. All right, so we got an account page here. Badgers Bank. Let's play with it. Always click stuff, try to break it, see what happens. So we just type a bunch of nonsense in here. What happens? Valid username or password. That's fair. Why don't we just try admin? That's always a good one. Doesn't work. Looks like they changed their default password. Always do that, by the way. The pipeline hack earlier this year was related to a compromised default password that caused millions of Americans not to be able to get gas. All right. So we can't really get in here without an account, it looks like. Why don't we make one? We'll make an account. Magpie. We'll make a password. Sign up. We'll put our credentials back in. Perfect. Looks like we got some kind of landing page. We got some information here. Let's click some more buttons. Nothing really seems to work. We can sign out down here, but other than that, that's in the bottom left in case my video is blocking it. Let's inspect here and see what's going on. Thanks, Alex. So as we're looking through this, we're just looking for things that could be interesting. Looking at the source code. We've got a link here. A nice bearded man is the user. It's got our username Magpie. Nothing else super useful, but this really looks like it's in the middle of being built still and someone is managing it. So I would say we should try and become the admin account, because we saw the amount of unfinished features. Half this stuff doesn't work. This website doesn't really seem to do much right now. It looks like it's under construction, just based on the state of it. All right. We'll get to exploitation, the breaking and entering step. So there is a lot of different ways you can approach this step. Infinite, really. But you need to gain access in some capacity. You're typically going to be doing it using a framework like Metasploit. I believe it was developed by Rapid7. Or you're going to be using some form of manual exploitation. So I'm just going to tell you right now, we're not using Metasploit. I don't expect you to know that. That is a advanced workshop all by itself. But we're going to be using some kind of manual exploitation today. We just got to figure out what it is first, because there's a lot of different kinds. But we want to break and enter into this box, this website right now, that is. This isn't usually easy to find. As I said, it's not clear. The website's not going to give you hints on how to break into it. That would defeat the point of its security. But you want to look at the version numbers, look at unpatched software and old services, unprotected services. So if we find outdated software, Google that version, see if there was a vulnerable exploit for that. Maybe you can abuse that. We're looking for reverse shells and remote code execution. Did they leave a shell somewhere on their website? If they did, that is not good for them. We can really use that to our advantage. A shell in this case is same as Bash or the terminal, just on their platform instead of yours. Default passwords, we talked about that. We tried admin, didn't work. Accessible password files, typically storing your passwords in plain text or poorly hashed passwords where people can access them is bad form. Don't do that. It's where lots of compromised accounts have come from in the past few years, like the Heartbleed bugs and dictionary attacks. These refer to ways you can credential stuff and repeatedly enter words to try and get in people's accounts. Have good passwords, everyone. Again, it's not linear direct typically. You're going to be jumping all over the place most of the time. It's good to make notes on what you've done and what you've found. And it takes a lot of practice. This is difficult most of the time. It's one of the hardest steps. It usually takes the most amount of time by far. All right. So now that I've told you a few things, we're going to take about 15 minutes to try and break this website, try and get admin access. That's what we are really focusing on here. How do we get further along? Because all we've done so far is enumerate without breaking anything. Exploitation is the stage where you want to beat their systems in some way and abuse them. All right. So I'll give everyone about 15 minutes. If you're stuck, we'll come back to you in about 6 minutes or so, and I'll give you some hints. I just want you to try stuff. Look at those fields that we put our credentials into. I know it probably feels like I'm leaving you in the dark here, but I just want you to try anything. Google PHP exploits. Start Googling things, see what you can find. I'll give you a bit of guidance in a few minutes, though. I just want you to try it out for yourselves first. And don't worry if you don't even know where to start. That's fine. We all start somewhere. If anyone wants to share how far along they are, you feel free. If you haven't gotten anywhere, you can share that too. That is completely fine. I haven't taught you anything, so I don't expect you to know anything yet. That is, you're gonna know how to do this. Don't worry. All right, I'm going to give everyone another minute or so. See what you can find with the complete lack of information I've given you about this specific system. The general concepts here, the solution you could say is in those, but these are very general. So it's okay if you're not getting anywhere with them. All right. Let's talk about how we could start going about this. So we know from earlier from our network scan, as well as looking at our Nmap scan, as well as looking at our source code, there is a database here, MySQL database at MySQL. So is this exploitable in any way? You want to be the admin. You want to get the admin access to this database. Could you inject it? Maybe. If you don't know what SQL injection is, I want you to Google it. This is what finding exploits is like. You find something that you think you could abuse, and you look it up, you figure it out, you try things. That's why the states take so long. But we also have an entire workshop on this. We didn't have it this semester, but we had it last year in fall, and James did it, a former club member, and it's really good. I would recommend everyone watch it. But a lot of the things we cover in this workshop today have entire workshops dedicated to that one topic. So again, this is a very broad topic. And then there is 7 flags in the web app. I want to know if you can find them all. And I want you to hunt through directories and remember what web exploitation taught you. These are really good places to start. These are all Linux directories. You would have seen a few of them in your introduction to Linux workshop. So I would start looking at those if you've gotten to that stage. There's two exploits that I want you to use in this stage, not just one. There's often much more than one. So with this information, we'll give you another, let's say 6-7 minutes, and then we'll come back and then see where everyone's at. And again, if you find anything, post it in the chat. Not flags, of course, but if you make progress, I want to know. Or if you have questions about anything I just said, it's fair game. You can use GoBuster if you want. Go for it. You learned about that in web exploitation. It's one of the tools you learned before. I'm not covering it here because you've already looked at it before. One of the tools that I believe Greg taught you. You're allowed to use any tool you want. Yeah, the big things that might lag this box is, I didn't mention this earlier, but it refers to abusing the box. Please don't fork bomb the box or recursive grep. That will tie up its system resources. Don't do that, please. But yeah, using Dirbuster should be fine. GoBuster, sorry. All right, we'll take another 2 minutes or so. Then I'll talk about what I would do. Has anyone managed to successfully SQL inject? All right. Moving on. What is SQL injection? We'll talk about that here quickly. I just want to reiterate that we have an entire workshop on this. This is very condensed. I'm teaching you what you need to know today for what we're going to do, but there is a lot outside of this. I would recommend you go watch James's workshop if you're interested in this. And SQL injection it's important to know, and it's an easy, fast trick you can use almost anywhere, especially with regards to forms and where you know there's going to be a database. So SQL, so it stands for Structured Query Language. And yeah, you form these queries. So you are querying databases in this case. It is a declarative language. So actually, I'll talk about what it is first. So a database is just a bunch of tables. It has columns and rows, just like an Excel spreadsheet. And it asks you to allows you to ask the database to return certain information. So basic SQL structure here. It's a declarative language, so we're telling it what we want it to do. It's typically one line at a time, or you can kind of run a script that way. So you're going to select columns from a certain table where X conditions are met. So, and then it'll return something that meets all of this. So, and it's all in uppercase. That's just part of the syntax of this language, part of the semantics. So here's an example of a query. We're going to select a name, a password from users where their age is equal to 24. And we have a delimiter here, of course. And we have some user IDs. We didn't mention that up here, so we're not going to look at those. It's not going to query that at all, the ID column. We asked for some names and some passwords. It's going to query both of those. We also asked it, we gave it a condition, where. So the age has to be equal to 24. So we have two rows here where the age is equal to 24. So it's going to give us the names and passwords. These things, you're going to select those names and passwords are from users where age is equal to 24. So you get these two things. This is a pretty straightforward example. You're going to run a query when you log into a website, and the backend is going to check if your info is in the database. This is a loose interpretation of how actual logins work, but basically it cross-references your credentials with what it has on hand. Typically, things that you put in are going to be hashed and secured in a multiple of ways, and checked against another hash. But don't store passwords in plain text. Don't do it. Plain text meaning like just plain English in this case. So here we're going to select star. That's a wild card. So it can mean anything or all. From users where, this is their condition again. So you're going to be looking at users where username equals Mr. Magpie and password equals 12345. So you're going to select all the columns from the table with that asterisk. If it returns a row, you get logged in. But if you don't match the credentials, it's not going to log you in because you don't match the query. The query doesn't pull anything up. That's why you don't get logged in. Now for the fun part, the injection. SQL injections are possible when string concatenation meaning the addition of two things together. You stick one thing on the end of another thing, depending on the order you concatenate them in. And you form this query that's sent to the database. So that's why we have orders to everything that we're doing. And it allows you to inject your own SQL code into the query, and you modify its behavior. So here we have a query. We're using string concatenation. So we have parentheses on each end. We can see we're concatenating our username and password into one query, but there's also another password in the middle. We're injecting a password in the middle. How to inject your own code. So this is what I wanted you guys to do. This right here. So you're going to use the username apostrophe space or space 1 equals 1, which we know is true. We're evaluating it as a Boolean being something that is 0 or 1, true or false. It has one of those conditions. I believe you learned about that in probably the first computer science course you take. Colon, space, tac, space. So this refers to commenting out the rest of the query. So the query here is going to become select wildcard from users where your username is equal to apostrophe space or space 1 equals 1, which is true, remember. Colon, space, tac, space, and. But it's going to ignore everything after those last two spaces there. If you don't put these two, you need all these spaces in the right spot. Otherwise, this injection won't work. Yeah, I believe you should be able to copy that from chat. All right. And this kind of explains why everything works. So using this query, because 1 equals 1, that's true. It returns all the rows because you've convinced the backend that that's correct. You've tricked it into letting you log in. All right. So we're not going to get to escalation yet. I'm going to get a bit of a demo here. So we're no longer going to be the Magpie user. Instead, we're going to SQL inject. And I just typed a bunch of nonsense into the password field. In case you are wondering, it doesn't matter what it is because of the way we injected. Yeah, you need 2 spaces after the dash, so completely copy what they've. It might not show up in the chat, but you need 2 spaces after those last tags or those dashes for it to work properly. So we've got a few things here. We still have the same panel on the left. We're admin now, though. That's pretty cool. There's a flag here. Fancy that. So we got a couple options. We have something called get current files. We can run it. I should mention before that we had that table there. That was the same we saw before, but it's not important at this point. We've established that. So we have get current files. So this looks, if you remember your Linux workshop at the very beginning of the semester. Oh no, that's too bad. Yes, formatting is very important when it comes to SQL injecting. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. You got to have the spaces in the right spot. But back to this, we have a few things here. So we have what looks like a Linux file system. It looks like they ran an ls tac. Ls is the command for listing the contents of a directory, similar to dir in Windows dir. tac.al is going to give us all the information, and it's going to be very yeah, it is a Vine reference. But we have an ls-al command here. It's a very verbose command that really reveals hidden files of a directory. It reveals everything. It tells you everything about them. So this first part here, remember, is all your permissions. You're going to have user group, and then the user, or the group and the user, the size of the files, and then the date they were modified. And then this is the working directory. This is the one up from it, remember. And then you have all these files down here as well. So there's a few other interesting things here to look at in case you haven't seen them yet. I just highlighted them. But there's a few things that aren't PHP here. And those probably are worth looking at. Right, so we looked at config. This just configures the website. We didn't find anything there because we've seen the source code. Dashboard is what we're on right now. We're on the admin panel, so we kind of know we're going to do that. I'm going to go through a few of the other options here in a second. Index, that's the very first page you went to. Log in, log out. Those aren't going to help us too much anymore. Register.php, we made an account there, but nothing else. But we got notices, this robots file, don't know what that is. And .hidden, don't know what that is either. So get error logs. Let's try a few things here. So it doesn't want to print the error logs. Clean cache, we're good that way. Remember, it was unfinished, so that's probably why the error logs aren't working. Get license. We got a nice license file right there. But you remember what I said earlier? This looks like a Linux, or just now, really. This looks like a Linux file system. Let's take a look at that. So we're going to inspect again. Expand recursively. And we're going to want to kind of we're going to look for get current files here. There is faster ways to find this, but we're just going to scroll through and look for where this is in the source code. All right. So get current files is right here. I just missed it, but it's right here. So if you want to follow along, it's yeah, I would just look for this massive block, and then it's just above that. So this massive block of what's in the Linux file system. But it looks like we have our command here. This looks like a shell of some kind. Remember the ls-al command I talked about earlier? And cat varlog. So it looks like it's catting, it's printing to the console. This right here. Same with these other scripts. We're catting another thing here. We're catting a license file in our opt folder. Again, I told you that was worth looking at. Same with var. Also worth looking at. That's where you store any files that can change, essentially. Opt refers to generally user installed things that don't necessarily come with what you're using, but it depends on your Linux distribution. So let's try a few things. Looks like we can actually write in here. That's a shell. So let's try a few things. Who am I? We're just going to run that. Oh, spat out something other than what we had before. www.data. That's the server. Let's try a few other things here. So we saw, let us go back to default here. We saw we have Charles here, right? Why don't we see what's in Charles's home folder? Interesting. So there's a few things we're finding here. There's a flag there, but nothing else looks super interesting in here. Bash history, bash logout, bash RC. These are all things you would find in most users' folders. Nothing out of the ordinary. We could look in those, but we don't have that much time, unfortunately. But there is a flag there. You take a look at that if you want. Now, you remember how I said we could look at other directories like opt? Those are really good to look in. Why don't we see what's in there? All right, so it looks like there's a folder called backups. And we got our license in there, clean cache. This is everything that was running everything else in this menu. So let's keep going down this rabbit hole and see where that gets us. /backups. We'll run that again. Looks like there's something else here, but we got a file here, PW. That probably stands for passwords. So why don't we take a look at this and see what's in there? So to do that, we can cat. We're going to use the exact same file path as before. Perfect. So here we find that Charles, or whoever runs the server, someone has made a grave mistake and posted their credentials in a single file. Not encrypted, not hashed, nothing. So at this point, I think we've exploited a few things. Remember, we did the SQL injection, and then we got to this point where we kind of enumerated through our new options with the admin access to the admin panel. And then we found that we could exploit this command right here. There is a shell right here. So now we have his credentials. There was a few other things on that file system. I encourage you to dig around, but we're gonna move on from this point. So we know his username is Charles, and his name is applesauce. His password is applesauce1. All right. So I hope this is big enough now. Let's make it even bigger. And if we can we post those credentials in the chat in case people are a bit behind? But I should have this stored in my history. Perfect. Well, why don't we log in? So that is SSH Charles at, just like an email address, a domain, at that IP we talked about earlier. So there's an account on this server. So remember, a website's not the only thing at this IP address. That's just the one port service hosting that. There is also an SSH service, which we're going to use, port 22. So we'll just type in his password here. It prompts you for it. Perfect. We're in. So let's take a look around and see what we can find. We're just going to ls what's in his current directory. We kind of saw everything there already, right? So, yeah. So it doesn't look like there was anything else too useful there. We can take a quick look around though. Why not? Permission denied. All right. It looks like he doesn't really gonna have many privileges. Let's try and do some other stuff. I don't know. Actually, no, we do know the password for Charles, but it's probably not gonna run sudo on this. And this number right here just refers to the container we're running on. That's the name of the machine. We're running this in a virtual machine. So it's we're hosting this somewhere else. Perfect. So now we got those credentials in there. So it doesn't look like we can do a whole lot right now. So we're gonna go on to the next step here. I know he can't run sudo on this machine. The machine just told us that. So we want to elevate or escalate our privileges. It's good where we have a shell with this user, but we want to get a little further than that. We're still trying to get that root flag, remember? So if I try to navigate to root, it's not going to let me. So we can't look at that flag right now. We can't go to that directory, change directory, cat that flag. I mean, we could try still doing that. But system's not going to let us. We need to have more privileges. We need to escalate our privileges. We have another workshop entirely on this topic. I believe we did it last year. So look at that as well. This workshop has a bunch of little workshops. They're not little, they're full workshops, but there's a lot of learning to be done here. So we're going to look at the slides again. Perfect. All right. For escalation, I'm just going to pull up my slides on my other screen here so I can read my notes. You want to find vulnerable programs or services that run as root. So I'll talk about what that means in a second. You're going to need to enumerate and exploit again to do this. You're in a constant cycle of cycling between these two phases, and that is going to allow you to escalate. So once you exploit something, you're going to have to enumerate again, or you're going to have to exploit more than once or enumerate more than once using different tools. It's a complicated process, not a straight path. What we're doing today, there's not a ton of tools being used in comparison to what you can really get into. This process in real life can take months, years even, of people trying to get into machines. So don't take this as representative necessarily. Some machines might be easy as well, though. So we're going to need to enumerate and exploit to do this. A really good resource, remember this, it's important, is GTFO bins. It's hosted on a GitHub website. So this contains a big resource of, why don't we go there right now? Actually, a bunch of Unix binaries that can be used to bypass local security restrictions and misconfigured systems. So as it says here, we can break out of restricted cells, escalate or maintain elevated privileges, transfer files, basically allows us to abuse Linux commands. So you're going to see a bunch of really similar ones in here that you might have seen before, and it shows you how to abuse them. So we're going to keep this in mind when we're going through here. But the goal here is to get root access. And the command "who am I" is going to allow you to determine who you are and what you're really going to be capable of. So you often will switch user to user, but I'll get into that in a slide or so. But you want to get root access. However, it's not linear, as I talked about before. This entire process is typically not linear. So you're typically going to go from a low privilege account as a user to a higher privilege account, like an admin. So they might have a few tools that the user doesn't, but they aren't root necessarily. So root is always the highest privilege. That is where the most privilege comes from, and you can do whatever you want. So you own the system if you're root. You don't necessarily own it if you're admin. Admins can have different levels of privileges, but working upwards, you want to elevate vertically, go up in privilege. You might have to go through an admin account before you can get to a root account. It really depends on the system and how it's configured, or where the exploit is. So you might not always find credentials for a user like that. You might have to find other ways to get in. So you might have to go from admin, you might have to go back down to a user, and then you go back up to a higher privilege user. It's not always cut and dry. But basically, the more privileges you have, the more potential there is for an attacker to get root access, which is super helpful. That GTFO bin is a super helpful tool for this. This is a form of vertical escalation. You might need to move horizontally, or some people call it laterally. EJAZ covers this in his advanced workshop, and he did this year on his advanced workshop on breaking boxes, that is. So once you have done that, you can access accounts with other privileges, essentially. That's greatly simplifying the actual process, but you're going to want to look at these utilities as well as services running in the Linux system. So sudo tacl, I checked to see if we could sudo on this machine. The machine got angry at me. So no, we can't currently with this user. We need more privileges. Cron tab, opt, srv, these are also good things to check. There might be scripts and programs in the user's home directory. We looked in Charles's home directory, pretty bare. Nothing a whole lot there. But we might look at bash history. So what bash history is going to tell you, why don't we actually go into the let's see if people have been making files in here or not. All right. So nothing of tons of importance there. I forgot to actually clear that. So no one actually wrote it down. But that can be useful. It was useful there, but you can't see it anymore. So password files, you might want to take offline or crack passwords in plain text elsewhere. So you might want to sneak onto someone's machine, steal a bunch of files, come off before they notice, and then use them at a later time. So with this information, I want to see if you guys can escalate your privileges. Get to a different user potentially, but I want you to escalate your privileges in some way. It's going to involve abusing a few different things, but I know you can do it. So we're going to spend, I want to say 5 minutes on this, let you check out this stuff here, see what we can find. How are we going to get more privileges? But I want you to start with this. It's going to be tough. I will be happy if anyone gets it, but we'll give you, well, why not actually 2 or 3 minutes? We're running out of time here. So we'll just see what you can get. This can be combined with exploits one of the most difficult steps. You have to root around a lot in the user's system. So see what you can find. The Linux file system has a lot of stuff in it, and learning what they all do takes a long time. So given what I've given you, finding based on what I've given you here, you can start with a few things at least. In addition to let's look at the the other where was it? These directories here as well. You can use those to assist your search. You could start looking around in those, see what you find. Perfect. I keep skipping to the next slide, but I'm going to tell you what to do anyways. Perfect. Give you another minute and we'll start. Give you a few tips. All right, you probably saw this from me flipping between my slides, but this would be of great help to you. So I just want to talk about privilege escalation and the SUID. So SUID is set owner user ID upon execution. Is a special type of file permissions given to a file. So typically this is represented as a bit when you're talking about file permissions. So just like those read write execute permissions that we saw earlier, this is another one. So you find normally in Linux, when a program runs, it's going to inherit access permissions from the logged in user. So whoever is running that file, regardless of who actually owns it, is going to look at the access permissions of that user. However, if you give temporary permissions to a user using SUID, you can run a program or file with the permissions of the file owner than the user who has it. So say a file is owned by root or an admin. You want to run it as a user. You can break out of user privileges into admin root privileges if you run that file, perhaps, or that utility. So, knowing this, you want to elevate your privileges to higher than what they were currently. You want to find what utilities an elevated user could use. This command is going to help you see what the SUID bit is enabled on currently. So it's super useful here. And it helps us look for utilities that are very useful here. A quick note on this, don't insert random Linux commands from strangers. I know this is very ironic of me to say, but they can damage your system if you're not sure what they do. This one is good. We're trying to teach you things here, and I want to help you along. But as a general rule, don't always just go on Stack Overflow and insert them. Some people put malicious code in sometimes. And what we want is to try and exploit some code to escalate ourselves. And after running this command, I want you to look at GTFO bins and see which of these utilities could be useful. So we'll give another 5 minutes or so. 10 minutes, we'll say. No, 5 minutes. I just want to make sure we have enough time here. Put that command in, see what you can find. Use GTFO bins. We'll go from there. I know this is a lot to take in. If you take 329, we do discuss more in detail about how all file permissions work and a general overview of the Linux file system and how the Linux kernel organizes information, where things are set. And if anyone finds anything of interest, they can post it in the chat. It is not chmod. Remember, you are not a sudoer. You're not going to be able to change permissions on a file in the root folder. Be good if you did though. That'd be quite the not even an exploit. You're just abusing the way they've set it up. But run that command. Post what you find. All right. If you found some /user directories, maybe plug them in the GTFO bins and see if there's any ways you can abuse them. Remember, we're back in the enumeration and exploitation stage. So we're kind of flipping between the two. It's all you're always rotating between everything all the time. So you're never in one place. So if you're still looking for things, you're still enumerating, and if you're trying to break something, you're exploiting it. And using that, you can escalate. All right, we'll give another minute or so, and then we can get going with how to get that flag. It's exciting. All right, so let's look at what we've got here. It looks like I've gotten logged out. All right. let's run that command we talked about earlier. So we get a few things here. We get these are all so they're the ones in the bins. Those are the binary. Those are all or binaries. Those are all utilities. So mount is going to let you mount a file system. New group. We got a few others. Passwd password. So that's where you're going to keep all of your users are in there. Find. That's an interesting one. Unmount. Sue. pkexec sudo. So things that typically would require an SUID bit. But the one I really am interested in here, we also got a few other daemons and helpers as well. But the one I really want to focus on is this one right here. Find. So let's go to GTF opens. If I can type, let's go to find. So it can be used to break out from restricted environments by spawning an interactive system shell. I'm going to make this bigger for everyone to read. So you can break out restricted environments by spawning an interactive system shell. So it looks like they're doing this by you have find. So find is normally for finding files in Linux, by the way. That's what it's for. You can look for things that way. But you got find. This is the working directory. Tac exec. So that's important. Running a command here, and then /:, and then quit. So if the binary has the SUID bit set, it does not drop the elevated privileges and may be abused to access the file system, escalate, or maintain privilege access as an SUID backdoor. So what this means is since this has the SUID bit enabled in this system configuration, it's a poor choice by the system developer. We can insert commands into here essentially and run them like we have elevated privileges without actually being an elevated user at all. So let's try it out. Let's try find dot. So we're going to go in the current directory. It doesn't really matter what's in there because we're not actually using it to find files. Remember, we're using it to abuse the fact that we can run and privileged inside of it. Just making sure we're typing this in right. There's a lot of syntax. But looks like we got the contents of that root flag. So we did this by using our find command in our working directory. This doesn't really matter in this case. Using the exec tag and then kind of injecting our own elevated user command where we tried to cat earlier, remember? So if I just try and do this, it doesn't work. But since it's in this command find, and we found that by using GTF obins, we can run with an elevated privileges and we get the flag here. So super useful stuff. Try it out for yourself. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Did I lose anyone? Punch this flag in. It's worth a lot of points. There's a reason I didn't give you any others. Well, you got one other that I showed you, but I showed you where to find some other ones. And if in case you're looking, this is the only flag on this file system. The rest of the flags are located. I mean, there's one in Charles's home directory somewhere, but the rest of them are within the web app. You're gonna have to look there. And I believe we're gonna leave this up for I think a week or so, in case you want to play around with the box later. But if no one has any questions, if I got to this point, try running that command for yourself. Get this flag. we'll just have a few closing statements, and we'll talk about some other. I'm just rambling here. I need to open my slideshow. Okay.
I'm hopping back in. I believe that's the end of the workshop.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Zach, for giving this for us. If anyone has any last-minute questions, you can either ask in the Discord or shove them in very quickly now while I do some housekeeping. This was our last workshop of the semester. Exams are coming. Everyone's probably very stressed. So this is our last workshop. We will likely be meeting next week on Monday and just playing a couple games. Koth uses a lot. It's King of the Hill on Try Hack Me. It uses a lot of what we learned here. It's how a lot of the executives got into the box breaking. So we'll probably play that. We might get into some CTFs. We might just play games or just hang out if you want to come talk to the execs. So that's what we'll be doing next Monday at 6 p.m., but there's no scheduled workshop. So just a heads up. Also next Monday, students across Canada can now register for Magpie CTF starting Monday, December the 6th. This means that if you're in high school, if you're in any type of post-secondary, so a technical college, a university, anything, you can now register for Magpie CTF. It's our CTF put on by us. It'll happen in February at the last weekend of reading week. I believe it's February 25th to 27th. Please sign up. There's lots of prizes. It's super fun. And if you go to our workshops, you have a huge advantage at winning. That's, I think, all we have. So good luck on everyone's exams. I hope to see you next week. Thank you so much, Zach, for doing this workshop for us.
Yeah. And I do want to put a quick thank you for Josh Novak. He helped develop this box, and he originally developed the workshop last year. So big thanks to him. He's RMRF in the Discord if you want to find him.
Awesome. Well,